Shalom, this is Avi Lipkin again. It's been a hiatus now of quite a few months since our last YouTubes. Very sadly, my father passed away in March of 2014, and then my brother died in late September 2014. It's not been an easy year for me. Followed by 3 months in the US. I came back in December. I've been in Israel now, praise God, 2 months. I've had a chance to rest up and lick my wounds. But I felt it was important to continue talking about Russia and Ukraine, and of course the role of President Obama and the one world government in what is happening in Russia and the Ukraine. I concluded part 7 almost a year ago, talking about the Russian-speaking population. I ended part 7 with an explanation of the fact that there are Russian-speaking people, former Soviet citizens, who now live in independent countries, which were part of the Soviet Union, are now independent countries. And Russia wants very much, not only for nationalistic and historic reasons, but for economic reasons, to bring back these Russian-speaking people into the embrace of the Russian nation, the Russian country, known as Russia Federation. And primarily of interest, of course, is the eastern part of Ukraine. Ukraine, as I have explained in 7 previous YouTubes, is a country dominated by Catholics, Roman Catholics in the western part of the Ukraine, and Eastern Orthodox Russian Christians in the eastern part of the Ukraine. It's almost about 10 million Russian-speaking people whose heart is with the motherland, with Russia. As I also said in a previous YouTube, that Khrushchev, who was a leader of the Soviet Union in 1953, right after Stalin's death, in order to try to placate the Ukrainian people, gave them a tremendous amount of Russian land and Russian population and Russian factories and the peninsula of Crimea, which is where the Soviet Navy was based, gave it all part and parcel to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1954, a year after Stalin's death. Many people call this the Khrushchev's folly of leader Khrushchev. He was Ukrainian, by the way. He was a Soviet Ukrainian, and he wanted to amend relations. He wanted to improve relations between the Russian people and the Ukrainian people who are all Slavic. They speak similar languages. And so he gave a tremendous amount of new land to the Ukraine. And when the Ukrainian people broke away from the Soviet Union, and then, of course, a year ago, in February of 2014, when the Ukrainians demonstrated and overthrew the President Yanukovych, who was pro-Soviet, pro-Russian at the time, excuse me, not pro-Soviet, pro-Russian, and the western part of Ukraine really wanted its independence economically and militarily by joining the European Union and NATO. So the eastern provinces, who feel that Russia is their allegiance, Russia is their home, started a civil war. And the Russian separatists, backed by the Russian army and Russian government, though Putin denies it, has been fighting a very determined war for Lugansk and Donetsk to break away, these little sub-provinces there, to break away from the Ukrainian, independent Ukrainian Republic, and to, they don't say so, but eventually to rejoin Mother Russia. Again, Russia's population is 150 million people, more or less, with a very big Muslim minority. The Russian government plan is to return eastern Ukraine to the Dnieper River back to Russia, and thereby increase its Russian-speaking population by 10 million people, bringing it to 160 million. As a sidebar, we have to remember also that there are Russian-speaking people living in the 3 Baltic republics, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These 3 Baltic nations joined NATO. They're very concerned about a Russian invasion in order to return Russian control over Russian-speaking people in these Baltic republics. Don't forget, Latvia is 40% ethnically Russian. The Russians want these people back. And they want the land, which they conquered in 1939 when they made the famous, or the infamous, Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement with Hitler. Another area, like I said in the previous YouTube, is Transnistria, which is part of Moldova, which is a Romanian-speaking province, which theoretically should join Romania. Transnistria is a little strip of land there, which the majority of people are Russian ethnic people. And there is a land bridge which goes right across the southern coastal areas of the Ukraine to Transnistria. In other words, what we are seeing now in February of 2015, we are seeing battles as the separatists move south towards Mariupol. By the way, my family was from Mariupol. My family was from Donetsk, and my family was from Kiev. So, of course, we're Jewish, so we don't belong either to the Ukrainian or the Russian side. We as Jews and as Israelis are neutral in the struggle between the Russians and the Ukrainians. But this is not only a question of the Russians trying to restore their sovereignty over what was formerly Russian lands. They want the population, they want the numbers back in the Russian economy. Okay. I have taken the liberty of naming this YouTube Obama, Russia, and Ukraine. And what I want to do now is I want to look at two possible theories as to what is happening and why. And one of the things I've come to appreciate or understand over the last 25, 26 years that I've been working, speaking in Christian churches and working with Republican Party, Tea Party, other and nationalist and patriotic Western groups in Europe and in the Western Canada, US, is that there is something known as the One World Government. The One World Government is a conglomeration of countries and leaderships, economic leaderships, which encompasses, of course, the G7, European countries, you could say Japan, South Korea, Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand. It's called the One World Order, and for good reason. These people control the vast majority of the world economy, and they are controlling these things. These people, after World War II, decided to suppress religion. If Christianity is not cool anymore, Judaism is okay as long as Judaism is pacifistic, and in Europe indeed, and in many parts of the US, Judaism has become very pacifistic. If you want to be a little more militant as a Jew, you move to Israel. And so the universalist system is anti-nationalist. Russia today is not part of the one world government. Russia today is a nationalist government. It is a Russian Orthodox Christian faithful government. Putin himself, Vladimir Putin said, it kind of scares me in a positive way, he says what made Russia great is its Christianity. And that's unbelievable because Russia was controlled for 70 years by communism. They were destroying churches, they were killing and exiling Christian priests, Russian Orthodox priests, and the Soviets were also persecuting religious Jews and religious Muslims and shutting down mosques and synagogues. Now all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin comes out and says that what made Russia great is its Christianity. So Putin is very, very popular among his own people because of his very religious and nationalist stance. This does not jibe well with the one world government. One world government does not like religion, or if it is going to like religion, it's going to have to be something like, and forgive me, those of you who are Catholic, who are faithful to the Vatican, and I love this present Pope, but the Vatican is part of the one world government. This is my belief. And I have reasons for saying it. I'll probably talk about it in the next YouTube, which will deal with ISIS. The Vatican, the Europeans, the Americans, the Canadians, the British Commonwealth, Japan, South Korea are part of the one world government. I would say that Russia, which is nationalist and religious, is not the one world government. China, which is not necessarily a Buddhist country, even though they've moved away from the communist atheism. China is also, like Russia, a very nationalist country. It is not part of the one world government. And an interesting point that has to be remembered, of course, is that Russia today is a very big supporter of the Shiite Muslims, especially Iran, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. And what we see happening today, indeed, is that contrary to the conquests of ISIS, which is being little by little broken up by bombardments from Western air forces, the Shiites, who have been bitter enemies of the Sunnis for 1,400 years, are allies with the Russians, and the Sunnis, by and large, are allies with Western countries. In other words, the alliances are like this. It would seem United States, Canada, Europe, the Anglo countries, the Vatican are aligned with the Sunnis. Primarily Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, other what we would call, I wouldn't say moderate Muslim countries, countries that are not actively fighting the West like ISIS is. On the other hand, you have the Shiite countries led by Iran. So you have the Shiite countries, Iran, now the regime in Iraq is primarily Shiite, backed by Iran. The Bashar al-Assad regime, backed by Iran. Hezbollah in Lebanon, backed by Iran. The Houthis in Yemen, backed by Iran. And of course, you have Shiites scattered in countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan. And this will sound maybe shocking to many of you. Tremendous Shiite populations in Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, on the border between Venezuela and Colombia, Central America. The Shiites are very strong in Latin America. They are backed by Iran. Venezuela has a tremendous alliance with the Iranians. The Iranians bombed the Israeli embassy in 1992 in Buenos Aires. In 1994, they blew up the Amia building, the Jewish community building, killing 85 people. So the Shiites are backed by the Russians and the Chinese. This is the primary scenario as I see it. Regarding President Obama, President Obama is a very, very hard person to figure out because on the one hand, and something my wife picked up in her Arabic monitoring, is that he is a Muslim. He is a Sunni Muslim. His father was a Sunni Muslim in Kenya, so that makes him a Sunni Muslim. His stepfather was a Sunni Muslim in Indonesia. He was raised as a Muslim in a mosque and in a madrasa in Indonesia till age 11. My wife Rachel picked this up. If you go to Saudi Plant, YouTube, Saudi Plant, P-L-A-N-T, by P.P. Simmons, also known as Carl Gallups, Pastor Carl Gallups. It's very important. It's a 3-minute YouTube you should see. Has already almost 5 million hits. So you have the theory, which of course I do believe that President Obama is a Sunni Muslim, loyal to the Sunni Muslim agenda. On the other hand, there is another theory backed by Trevor Loudon, who's a very, very well-known New Zealander, and I've heard him speak, I've met with him, and he says that, no, President Obama is a Soviet agent trained by the Soviets. One of his great teachers was Frank Marshall Davis, and that he's basically a communist agent, a Manchurian candidate in Washington, D.C., fulfilling the Russian agenda. And I have my disagreements with my wife, but she contends that President Obama today is actually working with Russia to back Iran against the Sunnis, which doesn't seem to make sense, because that means that President Obama might be turning his back on Saudi Arabia, on Turkey, on Egypt, and in the Middle East itself, you have also duplicitous regimes like Qatar that are trying to play up both to the Shiite Iranian side and to the Sunni Arab side. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out, because indeed Russia has its own agenda to fulfill in the Middle East. The Europeans, NATO, the Vatican, the One World Government have their agenda to fulfill. And caught right in the middle of all this is Israel. And no one really likes Israel on either side, but I think Israel will come out on top because God gives us a majority of one. So stay tuned, please. The next YouTube number 9, we'll talk about ISIS, the rise and hopefully the fall of ISIS, and where this is all going. And I wanted also to say to all of you, I don't know if we have time, but we'll do it quickly, we have a very, very great tour coming to Israel now, the Gary Stearman Scholars Tour on March 15th, and hopefully this will not be the only tour, this will be the first out of many tours to Israel, and I will be hopefully escorting this group on many of its travels here in Israel till March 24th. We have our elections in Israel March 17th, and then the 24th we have the agreement with Iran, and it'll be interesting to see what Netanyahu's speech does.